Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy, Atypical Security Guard. Been a couple of weeks since I've been able to get on and do a live stream. I saw a story that is making its way, through social media, like most of these stories do. Apparently, last week there was a shooting. This shooting involved a gentleman who was in his home, had some sort of issue in terms of someone breaking into his house. He contacts law enforcement, tells law enforcement that he's going to barricade himself and I believe maybe his daughter into a bathroom. He gives the description of the person that is in the house, a very detailed description. When the police enter into the home, or when they get to the home, according to the news story, they notice that there is signs of damage to the door or to the windows, and there's also signs of damage to the vehicles that are in the driveway. When they get to the door, and you can hear from the body camera footage, there seems to be some sort of shouting or screaming, and the cops kick in the door. They make immediate entry. They go directly to the sound of the disturbance, which is kind of in the back of this house. And the door swings open, and you see the homeowner, who I believe is shirtless, right? And the perpetrator, who is dressed exactly in the way that the dispatch comes across. So when you look at the news stories, you'll hear the dispatch that comes across, and they say that it's the subject is wearing a black shirt, red ski mask or red hat, something to that effect. It gives a pretty detailed description. So when law enforcement makes entry and they get to the back of the apartment, or the back of the house rather, you've got the door that swings open, and you can see that there's two people standing there. One person without a shirt on, the other person clearly displaying, the red hat or the red ski mask, the black shirt, whatever the description was. And they seem to be struggling over a knife. In pretty quick fashion, the law enforcement officer shoots the homeowner, who does not have a shirt on. And once the homeowner hits the ground, law enforcement officer puts another 5 rounds into that homeowner. So in short, the person that contacted law enforcement for the issue of someone breaking into his home, potentially trying to do harm to himself and his child, that is the person that the law enforcement officer shot. So what are the takeaways? I want you to take this story and I want you to put it on the back burner, and I'm going to give you guys a little transparency about myself. So on Sunday of this past week, I, had my normal detail. And over the past couple of weeks, we have an app that we utilize for the job where I'm working. And it's got your schedule on it, right? We also get a schedule that's sent to our emails. Now, like most scheduling apps, you can link it to your phone. I use my cell phone for everything. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was link my work schedule to my phone, so that on my calendar, it would show, the district that I'm working in, the time that I'm going to be going into work, and I can kind of get everything set up in one place, right? Efficiency. The point that I want to make is that on Sunday, like most of us, I am pretty comfortable with my schedule. I've been working at this new location for almost 2 months. I'm pretty consistent with the places where I work, pretty consistent with the days and the times being the same. However, attention to detail, right? So on Sunday of this past week, I had a dual shift. I had to start at my normal location and site, and then halfway through the day, I was supposed to leave that district and go to a static site and work that site for a couple of hours. I looked at my phone and I thought that I knew what time I needed to be there. I thought that I had to be there at 2. So I make my entire day work around the fact that I have to get a certain amount of work done in one area of town so that I could be at this other location by 2 o'clock. I'm able to do all that. I get there, around 1:50, 1:55, go up to the person I'm supposed to meet, introduce myself, take my static post, work my 2 hours in that location, then break off and go to my next location. Now, when I'm there, I get a phone call from one of the supervisors and they're like, "Hey, we just want to make sure that you're on site." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm here." Now, in my mind, I'm thinking that I started too. But when I looked at my calendar in conversation a couple of days later, when I'm being called to answer for being 30 minutes late, I see that I didn't start at 2. I started at 1:30. If I would have taken a little bit of extra time and opened up my app, expanded my calendar, I would have seen that where that little green line was, it wasn't starting at 2, it was starting at 1:30. If I would have taken a little redundancy and taken the time to look at the email that's actually sent to my phone every week when the schedule comes out, I would have been able to cross-reference those 2 times, right? The point that I'm making to you is that my lack of redundancy, my lack of taking a little bit of extra time to make sure that I had my times correct, put me in a position where I arrived for a shift 30 minutes late. Now, I apologize for that, and to the credit of my supervisors, the conversation was, we all make mistakes. You're owning your mistake. It is what it is. Let's do better next time. How can I help you make sure that you're doing things, properly, that you're at the location when you're supposed to be there? Hey, nothing that you need to do. It's on me. I quickly looked at something as opposed to taking the time to focus on, making sure that I'm looking at my schedule. That's on me. It won't happen again. I apologize. Now, the reason why I bring that up is that from the standpoint of an employee, anytime that we make a mistake, right? Whether it's us in security, whether it's, working at a burger joint, any situation, we often look at a situation and we say, look, if I made a mistake, I'm going to own the mistake. I'm going to apologize for the mistake. And I'll say that I won't make that mistake again. I'll do something better next time going forward. And for the most part, we all feel that that should be enough, right? From the ownership side, because I've owned businesses before, from the management side, because I've managed businesses before, that's not necessarily enough to cover the mistake of not paying attention to the details, right? That location where I was supposed to be there, that 30 minutes that they didn't have coverage, anything could have happened, right? Someone could have been harmed. Someone could have been assaulted. Something worse could have happened, right? We don't know as employees what the company has to do to make up for the fact that the ball was dropped, right? We don't know if potentially a company loses a contract. Maybe a company is on the fence in terms of whether or not they're going to retain services for this company. And a mistake like that could be costly, right? And the reason why I draw that inference is because in this situation with me, potentially a costly issue of me not paying attention to detail, me rushing through and not, taking my time to make sure that I had the information correct before I made my move. That is the potential outcome. In a situation where it's life and death and you're going to be utilizing your firearm, it's even more important that you make the right decision in terms of discerning what you should be doing, when you should be doing it. You cannot rush. I was talking to my wife this morning about the same exact situation, and she says, when someone calls law enforcement, when someone calls the cops because, someone has broken into their house, or you're in a situation where you're working a post or you're working a site and something has happened that has put you in a situation where now potentially you have to use deadly force in order to solve the problem. Justifiably so, right? And in this situation with law enforcement in Las Vegas, They are going into a home where someone has broken in and is holding the other person at knife point. So they are absolutely justified in their reason for being there. The issue is that from the time the cop gets out of the police car to the time that they get up to the door to the time that they get to the back of the house, it's a maybe. And when I say maybe, I mean maybe 3 to 5 seconds before the first shot rings out. So my wife was like, what do you do in this situation? And I said, sweetheart, I'm going to tell you something that's going to sound very insensitive. And when I tell you guys this might sound insensitive to you too, because I've had this conversation with myself. Under what circumstances am I going to use deadly force to protect another person? And here's the rub. It might be seconds longer than the person who needs my assistance might want. Let me say that again. My utilizing deadly force in defense of another person might be seconds longer than the person who's needing it would think is appropriate. And let me tell you why. I want to make sure, because I can't take that bullet back. That's number one. Number two, every single person who is of age and of legal ability to do so has the ability to protect themselves via firearm, protect themselves via any weapon that they can legally carry. And a lot of people, not just in Portland, not just in Oregon, but all throughout the country, a lot of people have taken the stance that their protection is not their responsibility, it's someone else's. But when you put the responsibility of someone else to protect you, these are the potential outcomes. So as much as I understand and I empathize and I sympathize with people who are potentially in a situation where they need someone else to step in and save them, I am going to take that extra time to make sure, as much as possible, as much as humanly possible, that I am making the right choice, making the right decision, and putting myself in a position where I'm doing the right thing, even if that means that it takes a couple of seconds longer. The law enforcement officer in this situation is no different than many other law enforcement officers that we see. And I've made this argument 100 times on this channel. I literally cannot have this conversation any more than I already have. Law enforcement officers are training, and they're being trained that everyone is a threat. And that the most important thing is that at the end of the night, they go home. So if those two things are true, everyone is a threat, and the most important thing is that you go home at the end of the night, that is going to dictate your response to almost any and every interaction. So when people are going, man, this doesn't make sense. How are people ending up getting shot in this situation? How are people ending up getting shot under these circumstances? You know, to the average person, when I look at the situation, when I hear the story, how does this end up in a deadly encounter? It ends up in a deadly encounter because that is literally the mindset, that is literally the mentality, and that's literally the way that a lot of officers, I'm not going to say all, but in general, law enforcement officers are being trained that everyone is a threat, and at the most important part of their interaction with public is to make sure that they get home at the end of the night. So that puts them in these positions, in these circumstances, in these situations where their response tends to be a little quicker, a little more decisive, a little bit more aggressive than maybe the average person or another person would take not being in that same situation or circumstance. Now, I don't say that to be disparaging. I understand what they're up against, what they're dealing with, and this is a conversation that, from my perspective, I wish that this could be a conversation had by more law enforcement officers in an open dialogue. It doesn't seem to be happening. It doesn't seem to be something that people want to address, but I have addressed it time and time and time again. And these are the results. These are the results. The other side of that argument, though, is that if you feel that way and you agree with what I'm saying, then the opposite of that is going to be that the response is going to be slower, and the response might not be there at all if that's going to be the way that it's looked at. Does that make sense? Right? That becomes the conversation, because we can't have it both ways. We want law enforcement officers to be there in an instant. We want them to handle the situation immediately, but at the same time, we don't want and we will not tolerate any mistakes. So, that's a difficult task. Now, that being said, the information came out in the dispatch. A half a second, another second, 2 seconds more of patience in thinking about what came across that dispatch, paying attention to detail, potentially could have led to a different outcome. Now we're in a situation where everything is, more politically polarized in this country now than it has been in a long time, and things have already been hot in the streets for law enforcement officers. So now you have a racially charged shooting. You have the death of the person that contacted law enforcement to come out there, and people are demanding answers. And the potential for this to be a flashpoint or another negative issue in media, in the news, in general, it's there. We'll have to wait and see how this ends up and how it plays out. But very important for the private security guards who are watching this right now, who potentially watch this in the future. I wanted to share these two situations. My personal situation with what I failed to pay attention to detail this week and how that could have had negative ramifications, and the very, very deadly consequences that came from this Las Vegas police officer not paying attention to detail, not thinking about what the dispatch said, not taking a little bit of extra time to act before he responded with deadly force and having that lead to the death of an innocent person. Let me check these comments real quick before I get out of here. PBE says, hey, what's up? I'm going to call this a bad OIS based on what I've seen. Hey, one more thing about the situation. Even more frightening about the Las Vegas situation. Apparently, the involved subject, the person that was the perpetrator, they came in and turned on the gas stove. So apparently, allegedly, what they were hoping to happen was that they were going to have the police officers come in and perform an officer-involved shooting, and that would spark, no pun intended, a gas explosion. So, I mean, take that information and do with it what you will. Warden says, after getting the full context and the info on this story, you can't defend nor help law enforcement's reputation. I fucked up, can't be used for everything if civilians can't use it, if they shouldn't. A great point, guys. We as private citizens and we as security guards do not get to say, I made a mistake. It's like, okay, you made a mistake, but you're going to also be held accountable for it, And so that's the argument. Law enforcement should not be able to just simply rely on saying I made a mistake. That's not okay. Jack Spade Productions, appreciate you being here. Thanks for being a moderator. Good to hear from you. PBE says, don't call the cops even if you are the victim of a felony. Someone asked PBE, what do you suggest? Guys, look, the very real answer is that we should be responsible for our own protection. I know that, the average person does not want to put themselves in that position. I talk to people all the time. I talk to women. I talk to people that are elderly. I talk to people that are running businesses, people that have families. When you have these conversations and you not even talk about something like this, but when you just talk about the time that it takes for someone to get from point A to point B to be able to assist you and help you, ultimately the answer is you have to be the person that protects yourself. When we talk about situations that happen in schools, right? And you ask someone, how do we stop this from happening? People will say, our kids should not have to deal with this. They should not have to live with this reality. And then you say, okay, well then why don't we arm the teachers? No, we can't arm the teachers. No, 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 no. Well, why not? No, we can't arm the teachers. That's a law enforcement thing. Okay, well, then we should have cops in the schools. No, then it looks too much like a prison. We don't want that. People are not operating from reality. And the reality is that the only way to stop the person that is doing the evil, bad thing is to have someone there at that moment. You can only guarantee that if something were to happen to you, and you would like to stop that thing from happening, you're the only person that you can guarantee is going to be in that place, potentially in that situation. So you should be the person to deal with it. But the average person doesn't want that responsibility. They would much rather live under the illusion that someone else is going to come in and they're going to help them. But those people that show up, they're human. I saw a video on Instagram today. And it was from I don't know if it was in Indonesia or if it was in like the Philippines, some melanated area. And there were 12 adults and a whole bunch of kids at this park. And there's a pit bull that is attacking a very small child. The kid was probably like 5 or 6 years old. And this pit bull, I mean, it was mauling this kid. All of the adults were up on top of the play equipment. There's like 3 adults that are standing up on the slide. There's like 2 or 3 adults that are all the way up on top of the castle that you climb in. Everybody that was there, there's literally 12 adults and there's 1 dog. It's a pit bull, but it's a small pit bull. And this pit bull is mauling this kid, and every adult is up on top of the play equipment, and they're clapping at the dog and they're yelling at the dog. They're throwing shoes at the dog. It's like the only one that was trying to fight was this kid, right? And that's the reality. The reality is that you think that everyone would just, hey, there's 12 of us, 1 dog. We're probably going to all get bit. Let's go save this kid. Nope. They all had personal best interest at heart, and they just let this kid get mauled, right? And this is also probably a place where the people could not have firearms. That's a different conversation. What do you suggest? I'm not calling 911. That number is definitely not for assistance. Yeah, Warden says embrace the Second Amendment. 100%. Hey, Mike Alvarez. You gotta start making some videos, bro. It's been a long time. Yeah, I will put a link to the story in the description of this video once I load it up. Let's see here. Jack Spade. What are we talking about? Second Amendment. Damn straight. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. So, yeah, just to recap. 2 things that I brought up today. My personal situation of not paying attention to details and how that got me to a location 30 minutes late. No bueno. Cannot do that. I own it. That was my mistake. The second thing is that the police officers who were involved in the Las Vegas shooting that happened last week, the dispatch comes across clear as day. Perpetrators wearing a black shirt, red hat. I mean, it could have been a red sweatshirt, whatever it was. But clearly, when they get to the location and they kick in that door and the door swings open, you're looking at 2 people, one of them clearly wearing the clothing that was given over the dispatch. Police officer shoots the other person, not only once, but then as that person falls to the ground, levies 5 rounds into that person after they've not shown any threat. So Bad situation, potential flashpoint for protests and issues, and a stark reminder that we have to take a little extra time, pay attention to detail, and make sure that we're doing the right thing. And sometimes that right thing is going to have to take a little bit of extra time. Okay. All right, guys. Y'all have a great one. I'll put the link in this video, and you guys can check out the story, or you can look it up yourself. As always, appreciate you guys. Y'all be safe. Take care.